Okay.
So when we just press stream, that just starts.
So it's going to run out
What is?
the video.
Oh, yes, but I'm going to go back and start it over.
Okay.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. I'm 10 Investigates Emerald Morrow. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm here to talk about something that I think a lot of you all care quite a bit about, and that is Florida's freshwater springs. Did you know that Florida has the highest concentration of freshwater springs in the entire world? There are more than 1,000 artesian springs across the state. But what's really interesting is that a lot of these springs are at risk, and many of them have already disappeared or are at risk of disappearing or being impacted by pollution. So if we can just pull up some video right here, I want to take you along on a little journey with me. You're looking at some video that we shot going down the Weeki Wachee River in Hernando County. I'm sure many of you guys are pretty familiar with that. It is really a hot spot and a popular tourist destination. But one of the things that we learned is how nitrates are impacting our springs across the state. So excessive pollution from fertilizers, septic tanks and things like that, they get into the ground, they seep down into the groundwater, into the aquifer. And so all of the water that you're looking at right now that comes out of the springs, it comes from the aquifer. And so when the pollution gets into the ground, guess what? It's in the water, it's in the springs, that impacts the ecosystem. So you're really not at danger if you're swimming around like what you're seeing on the screen right now. No danger. But if you're drinking this water day in and day out, you know, it is toxic because nitrates are known to cause damage in humans when it's taken in at excessive levels. And it also hurts our animals and also our ecosystem that we have going on in the water there. So we had an opportunity to do some testing. And we tested the water at a couple of springs. We tested at Weeki Wachee. We also tested at Rum Island Spring and Gilchrist Blue Spring. And those are both up in Gilchrist County. And we found excessive levels of nitrates in all three of those springs. So the Florida Department of Environmental Protection has set what they call, I don't know if it's allowable levels, but there's a certain level that it really shouldn't exceed, and that's 0.35 milligrams of nitrate per liter. So at Rum Island Spring, we found that the levels were at 1.95 milligrams per liter. And at Weeki Wachee, we found that they are at about 0.8 milligrams per liter. So definitely above what it should be. So there are actually laws that are in place that are meant to protect our waterways, to protect our springs and things like that. One thing that I took a look at in this piece that I'm hoping you guys got a chance to see this evening at 6 o'clock. It's also up on 10tampabay.com. But what I'm hoping you're able to see and understand and take away from that piece is there's a piece of legislation, the 2016 Springs and Aquifer Protection Act. That act put in place a number of protections for our springs. And one of the things that it asks the DEP to do is to come up with a definition of harm. And what I mean is there's wording in the law that talks about any withdrawal from the aquifer, meaning consumptive use permits, things like that, shall not be harmful to the waters, should not be harmful to the aquifer. But what does harm mean? What is the definition of harm? So for the last 6 years, DEP has been trying to figure out what exactly is the definition of harm. And there are a couple of legal battles happening right now as it relates to the springs and this particular act. And I got a chance to sit down with the person who's behind this law. He's a former lawmaker, former senator, actually was president of the state Senate, David Simmons. He's a Republican out of Orange County and Volusia County. He represented those areas. And he told me that DEP is not enforcing the law that in the way that he intended, and that we can't just let people and businesses and cities just draw so much water out of the aquifer that it reduces the flows in the springs and could eventually just lead to some of the springs drying up and going away. As I mentioned before, we have seen that happen, and one particular instance is an example from our area, and that's Sulphur Springs. If you live in the Tampa Bay area, you're probably familiar with that community. But what you may not realize is that there is actually a spring there. It's still in existence, but it's so polluted now that you can't swim in it, you can't get in that water. You definitely don't want to drink it without it being treated. But it's the result of excessive pumping and pollution. And one of the things that I learned in talking to some of the people in this story is that most of Florida's freshwater springs are all concentrated right now in the central and northern parts of the state. But yes, now let me just go back for a second. So our freshwater springs are concentrated mostly in the central and northern parts of the state, but they used to be all over the entire state. And one of the very interesting things that I found is how most of the springs south of I-4 have disappeared. And a lot of that has to do with increased population, which means there's more of a need of a water supply. So cities and municipalities draw more water out from the aquifer, companies do as well. And so that puts a real strain on those springs. And so that law was put in place to try to protect the water and try to make sure that there aren't excessive withdrawals from the aquifer in a way that harms the environment. So there's just a lot of battle right now over what the definition of harm is, and believe it or not, they're still trying to figure out the definition of harm. I aired this story today and have been reaching out to the DEP for a little while, trying to get an interview or at least some information or response to what we found in the springs and some of the allegations that former lawmaker made. I got a response literally right after the story aired. I finally got the information that I was looking for, but essentially DEP defends the way that it is protecting the springs and actually says, as it relates to that law that I was telling you about and how they are kind of going back and forth over the definition of harm, they are still in that rulemaking process right now, trying to sort all of that out. So there's just a lot happening with the springs. I would love for you guys to tell me some of your favorite springs across the state, and maybe we can check out what's happening there. I'm sure, I haven't had a chance to look at the comments yet, but I'm sure a lot of you guys are making comments about Jenny Springs. Are we getting anything in there about that?
Not yet.
Not yet?
A lot of viewers.
Okay. Hey, viewers. Yes, they probably want to see the springs more than they want to see me. So let's show them some of the places that we got to explore. Isn't that beautiful? I mean, I was just in awe of what we have here in Florida. You're looking at, again, the Weeki Wachee River. That is fed, of course, by the Weeki Wachee Spring. Yes, Weeki Wachee. Okay.
That was an answer to like their favorite.
Oh, Weeki Wachee. Okay, Liz Ferris says Weeki Wachee is her favorite. I loved being out there. Although I will say I had a moment when we were out on the boat and there was a snake floating on top of the water. I was like, oh my gosh. But it's nature, it's Florida. But I think it's really important for us as journalists to consider the impact that our decisions as humans have on the environment. And it's important as an investigative reporter to ask these questions and make sure that our state agencies are doing what they are supposed to do as it relates to the environment and as it relates to the decisions that we make that impact the environment. So just saying hi to everybody. If you guys have questions, I'd love to answer what I can if you have them. Oh, somebody said Rainbow Springs. I haven't been there yet, but I hear that is beautiful as well. Someone says, until they quit building all these homes and ruining all this natural land, it will continue to be a thing of the last, maybe the past, is what you meant here. And we won't have nothing left but a wasteland. I mean, that's honestly the concern that a lot of people have. And again, I bring up the example of Sulphur Springs. It has pretty much been destroyed. During the process of researching this story, we got to go through a bunch of old photos of Sulphur Springs, and they were very old and not the best quality, but you could tell that it was a beautiful blue spring and quite the tourist attraction. But not so much anymore. So we hope that Weeki Wachee and all the other places like that don't suffer the same fate. Anybody else weighing in on anything?
Not yet. No extra comments at this time.
Okay. I'm just trying to think what else. It was really also fascinating to be able to take those samples. So we actually, for Weeki Wachee, went out with the Hernando County Health Department and went with their worker who takes their water samples, and they actually sample pretty regularly for bacteria. But we wanted to sample for those nitrates, so we went out with them and they had all the proper equipment to help us do that. We put the sample on ice, took it over to an independent lab, and they analyzed all those results and helped us see where the nitrate levels are much higher than what they should be. So it is just a very complex issue, and the three main things that experts say are contributing to the decline of our springs are pollution, as we've talked about quite a bit in this live stream, excessive pumping, which is something that we've kind of talked about, and we can go into that a little bit more. Or if you have questions about that, I'm happy to answer. And the last thing is excessive recreation. We all love the springs. I love the springs. I love going to them. But with more people coming to Florida every single day, it becomes a problem when there are so many people who are out on the water, sometimes doing things in the natural environment that they shouldn't, that causes erosion, that can really lead to the decline of the rivers and the springs and things like that. So excessive recreation can unfortunately be a serious problem. And I think we're going to run out of the video here, but you're looking at me and Bob Knight out on a canoe. He's the executive director of the Florida Springs Institute. Oh, it loops, so we love technology. This is a drone shot of the Weeki Wachee River, and you know, it's just breathtaking to see, but we just hope that this is something that doesn't go away for us. So any more questions coming in at all?
No more questions. Not so bad.
Okay, anybody weighing in on any other springs that they love? So really those are the big things. Again, excessive recreation, groundwater pumping, and pollution that are impacting our springs. The Florida Springs Institute is an excellent resource if you're interested in learning more about what's going on with the springs. The Florida Springs Council is also a great resource. I've spoken with them. They are actually in a legal fight with the Department of Environmental Protection right now. They are fighting with the DEP over the DEP's BMAPs, BMAP, that stands for Basin Management Action Plans. And these plans take, for example, river basins like the Santa Fe River and all the springs that feed that particular river, and they are plans that are aimed at how they can clean up the pollutants, the nitrates and things like that in the waters over the next 20 years or so. And for some of those BMAPs, they're saying there's no way that as they stand right now, they're actually going to clean up all the pollution that they are supposed to clean up in the next 20 years. So the DEP, of course, is saying, well, you know, that's not how we interpret the law. What we're doing is right on track, and it's in the Court of Appeals right now. So we'll see what the judges decide. That was a very interesting oral argument to watch them go back and forth over what they believe and watch how the judges were taking everything in. So you know, we live in Florida. This is a state where water is a treasure, and people come here for that. So for a lot of people, this is a political issue. For a lot of people, it's more than just a political issue. It's a quality of life issue. So just wanted to get on here and talk to you guys about this latest investigation. I really hope that you all are able to take a few minutes just to take it all in. We've got it up on 10tampabay.com/investigates. And if there aren't any other questions, we may wrap things up soon.
Liz Ferris said Jenny Springs is another spring she likes.
I love Jenny.
You do?
Mm-hmm.
And then just another Facebook viewer was saying that the water that was it was a Weeki Wachee video. It was
Okay.
beautiful.
Yes, isn't it gorgeous? It just almost seems like this is not Florida. You know, I mean, I think a lot of people think of Florida as the beaches. I'm not a native Floridian, so I didn't even know that these springs like were here the way that they are. It's just like, wow, this is almost a little bit more impressive than the beaches to me. I love the springs. They're great. Anything else?
That's it. If anyone wants to, figure out how they can get involved or, reach out to lawmakers and like try to like help the springs, do you know of any resources they can go to?
Oh, sure. As I was just mentioning, the Florida Springs Council is a great resource. They have a lot of information up that you can educate yourself on, but I think they also have ways that you can get involved in the springs and the issues surrounding that, as well as the Florida Springs Council. I know, as I was mentioning, the Florida Department of Environmental Protection is in the process of trying to figure out those rules for defining harmful. I think that they're taking input on that because I know that former senator that I was talking to proposed some rules. So I don't know exactly how that process fully works, but I know that they're in that process right now. So there may be ways that people can have their voice heard there as well. But again, the Department of Environmental Protection says that it's working really hard to try to protect those water resources. Is there another one?
Where can I see this story?
Yes, you can go to 10tampabay.com/investigates. It should be right there at the very top of that page there. That is Wendy. Hi, Wendy. Thanks so much for asking. Did I miss anything else? All right. Well, I know that it was much more fun to look at all the springs than it probably is to just sit here and watch me talk. But thank you guys so much for engaging with me, sharing what your favorite springs are. And I hope that you guys will also engage with the story, and we will talk with you soon.